Hello, welcome to Let's Talk About It with Taylor Nolan. I am your host, and today is going to be quite an episode. If you are a student in any kind of psychology or helping profession, if you are recently out of school, entering the helping profession, if you are a young adult, an older adult, wherever you're at, if you're involved in the helping field, this episode is definitely for you. And even if you're not in the helping field and you're interested in getting help, I think that this episode will also be helpful for you as well. So I've posted a bit on my Instagram about some of the stereotypes about therapists and whether or not some of these stereotypes are A, true, and B, if things are unethical or just considered unprofessional. So today, this is going to be like one of multiple part episodes. Today's guest is a registered clinical counselor in BC. So she works remotely with those clients from BC and lives in New York. She is more of a coach here in the States, as she does not have a current license to practice therapy in the States. So that's important to keep in mind, the just distinguishing factors of this kind of experience and ethically what's involved here. But I do want to answer a few of your questions here before we get into this call with Megan. And like I said, this will be a two-part episode, so I'm going to continue this conversation on ethics and being a professional in the helping field of having some kind of public knowledge and just kind of how to navigate social media as a professional. So some of the questions, let's see, you guys had a lot of really good ones, so I'll get to some now. Hopefully my conversation with Megan will answer a few of those as well. And part two of this episode with I'm hoping it will be a guest that is actually with the American Counseling Association, plus some other therapists in different stages of life. So I want to get as many, voices in on this as possible because everyone does things a little bit differently. Okay, so one of the questions, just kind of to start off, one of you said, I honestly don't even know how to get a therapist's help. I'm scared. It'll be awkward. I don't even know where to start. So first, I just want to put this out there. They're not a sponsor for the pod, but I would love if they were. So psychologytoday.com is a great resource. You can filter for if you're looking for a male therapist, a female therapist, a therapist in your area that takes your insurance, what kind of specific issues you're looking to address in your sessions. You can kind of filter for all these things, and it just makes it super easy to sort through. It can be a very overwhelming process for sure, but be kind to yourself, take it one profile at a time. So second question here that I'm going to answer is what my education is. Someone said, what is your education? Did you get your master's, PhD? Where at? So I have a bachelor's degree in psychology from Stevenson University in Baltimore County. And then I have my master's degree in clinical mental health counseling from Johns Hopkins University, which is also in Baltimore. So that's kind of my background. I am a NCC, which is a nationally certified counselor, which, I took the national counselor exam. Usually people take that after they've already done their hours post-grad. I just took mine right out of grad and I'm still working towards my hours. But so I have that. And then I'm a LMHCA, which is a licensed mental health counselor associate here in Washington State. So not fully licensed yet, but working on it. Next question that I want to answer here is self-disclosure on the therapist part, risks and benefits to the therapeutic relationship and efficiency. So this is very important. And I think when we talk about social media and, therapists having a public image or identity, that it's assumed that everything that is public, that therapist does in their personal life is self-disclosure to their clients. Now, while I agree on some level that yes, it is, you are disclosing information about yourself, but it is not, however, in the therapeutic setting. And typically, the rule of thumb, ethically, what is advised in terms of self-disclosure in the therapist environment is to only self-disclose when it's going to be beneficial for the client. So the things that I share with my family, with my friends, are not going to be the same things that I'm going to share in my session with a client. It may be beneficial, say, if a client is struggling in an abusive relationship, for me to potentially share, I understand what you're going through. You're not alone. To the point to empathize with the client and for the client to feel like they're not alone. So I think there's a very different distinction here between having information out there on social media and displaying self-disclosure in the therapeutic setting with a client. There are definitely risks in doing self-disclosure, even when done ethically, that, it could make the client feel uncomfortable. There's always a thin line there, and making sure that the rapport is already built up and that it's actually going to be of benefit to the client. So I hope that answers that question. And then someone else asked, is it a sound idea to ask you as a therapist tips for mental health on social media? So I'm not sure how sound, because on my personal social media account, while public, it is not a professional account in terms of my licensing. So it's not like my private practice's Instagram page. And ACA, which is the American Counseling Association, their code of ethics, which was put out in 2014, has a section that's specific to social media, section H6 on page 18 of the code of ethics, states that it's very highly encouraged that there are two separate social media accounts. So if you are a therapist or a helper who, again, this is ACA code of ethics, so it's specific to counselors. However, I think it's a good practice ethically to apply to helpers in all different kinds of situations. So of having two distinct accounts, one that is personal, one that is distinctly personal, and the other that is distinctly professional. So I'll have a private practice Instagram page that is my organization. And often you'll see different group practices have Instagram accounts and Facebooks and whatnot that you can follow. And they will put out tips for mental health and answer some questions on there. So I will say that as a boundary, which I'll get into more of this either later in this episode with Megan or in part 2 of this, I would not answer questions from clients if they reached out to me via social media. And I would say it's okay to ask me questions and tips on mental health on my social media, because it is something I'm passionate about and that I advocate for, even in a non-professional setting. However, to be very clear and understanding that I'm not giving any kind of advice or tips as your therapist, that, I'm not at all practicing when I am interacting with, just you guys on my Instagram when you ask questions. So I hope that makes sense. Okay, it's that time. I want to take a little bit of a break here, because if you guys are starting to update your wardrobe as the seasons are changing, or if you're just not a stylish person like I am telling you, I have found the place for you. Shoe Dazzle is literally the place to get your shoe fix. And not even just shoes. Their clothing, their accessories, they have thousands of ways to step up your look, which can be intimidating, but let me tell you, they really help you out. Not only do they have the latest trends if you're looking for something new or specific, but you can keep checking in because they drop new styles literally every week. But you're given this really fun style quiz to personalize your shopping experience. So For me, it was like, I'm basically either super casual or I'm like very done up. And you can shop as a guest. But I'm telling you right now, you want to shop as a VIP member because it is definitely the best way to go. You save actually 30% off most retail prices all day, every day. Plus, you get free shipping and returns. Not to mention tons of other exclusive sales and perks. So I love being a VIP member. I wouldn't do it any other way. But it's also a flexible membership, so each month you can choose to stop or skip. And again, you get 30% off every single day, guys. So update that wardrobe. Now it's time to sign up as a VIP because right now you'll get your first pair of shoes for $75 off. Jeez Louise. That's literally as low as $10. You can't beat that. I don't know where else you can beat that. This is an exclusive deal for podcast listeners. So make sure you go to shoedazzle.com/aboutit to get it. Again, that's shoedazzle.com/about it to step up your look today for as low as $10. shoedazzle.com/about it. I'm about to go to shoedazzle.com/about it right now because this is just too tempting and I need some more shoes. But okay. Let's get refocused. Okay. We can get back to the show. And let me pick one more question here. There's just so many good questions. Someone asked if I will be referring or if I will be referencing the social media standards set forth in the ACA Code of Ethics, which, yes, already have a little bit. And someone asked, has anyone in the field ever discredited your capabilities because you're a reality TV star? That is a good question. I think I'll share a little bit on this before we get into this call with Megan. I think a lot of people have attempted to discredit my capabilities as a therapist because I was on a reality TV show. And I think in many other ways, I've experienced people trying to discredit my capabilities as a therapist, being a young therapist, being a woman of color as a therapist, just being, fresh in the field in a way, I've tried to been discredited just for all of those things, and definitely going on The Bachelor and on Paradise. I've experienced people trying to, there was when the show first came out, I remember, Jimmy Kimmel always goes through the cast, and this was what everyone said was, oh, there's a mental health counselor. Oh, well, she must need mental health counseling if she's going on the show. And it was done in such a negative way that really only perpetuates the stigma around people getting help and around just the mental health field in general. So that I felt was super harmful overall to the field and to my capabilities as a therapist, because it essentially says that if you are seeking help or if you are doing something maybe a little bit outrageous or maybe a little bit contradictory to what someone would expect of you, that you must need help. And to me, being a therapist who also goes to therapy is not a negative thing. That's actually a very beneficial thing, a very I think well-rounding thing that you can do as a therapist. So I don't think that I've allowed myself to be shamed in that way, because I just feel like that's such a silly statement for people to say. However, in terms of being professional, people have definitely tried to discredit me in saying that, going on reality TV takes away from your professionalism. And I've tried to really challenge that notion, just because to me, that's my private life. Certainly it is made very public. However, that's maybe private life isn't the right word, but I'd say personal life. That's a decision I'm making in my personal life. And, the way that I'm going to act in a professional setting with a counselor or in a workshop or whatever is going to be still pretty authentic to who I am on reality TV, but it's also in a very different setting. And we change so much based on our environment and who we're around and what we're experiencing. And so I think it's really unfair to kind of judge someone in one setting saying, this must be how they're going to be in all situations. And because they acted this way on this one thing, this is how they're going to be in this setting. And I don't think you can really judge someone's capabilities as a helper in such an extreme experience of your personal life, reality TV being one of them, where, it's a complete, not only is it a social experiment that you are entering into, but it is also a very controlled environment. So you're very much in a manipulated space where you don't have your phone, you don't have your TV, you don't have music, and all of these things kind of that you would usually use to cope, and your social support, all that stuff. It's really a huge challenge, and it's one of those spaces where you struggle, but that you come out stronger. So I think if anything, when people have tried to discredit my capabilities as a therapist because I've been on the show, if anything, I say being on the show and that whole experience in and of itself has done nothing but to help me grow as a person, which is then also going to help me grow as a therapist. And just as I want to encourage my clients to live a well-rounded life and to experience all of the experiences that they desire and that they yearn for and that they want to challenge themselves in, I want to give myself that same encouragement and that space to be non-judgmental of myself, to be free to explore things. And I think that's something that's so lacking in a lot of areas of our lives and the judgments that we put on ourselves. So it's really unfortunate. And I will say, to the point of discrediting my abilities, I've gotten a lot of different work opportunities to work with other people within the helping field from being on the show. So even though I might have maybe got somewhat of a bad rap, or I would have been judged as a therapist on a reality TV show, I think it actually shows a lot of strength that maybe isn't so visible from the get-go, but a layer deep is really present. And, I still think I have handled myself in a quote unquote professional manner in my personal life, which is absurd to even put that kind of pressure on yourself. But really, really good question. And I've definitely have gone off on a bit of a tangent here. So again, I want to get some more of these questions that you guys have about social media and about having a public presence as a therapist. So I'm going to talk with Megan Bruno here, who's a registered clinical counselor in BC and works remotely with her clients there, but also does some coaching around the mental health space in the States. I met her at the Fireside Conference in September. She is the host of the Failure Factor podcast and has about 16,000 followers on Instagram and on a public platform. It's a public page. And so going to chat with her about kind of how she feels about being a therapist that has a bit of a public platform and just kind of the ethics that go around that. So I'm excited to have this conversation with her. And then we'll definitely have another episode with some more people on to kind of discuss some of the ethics around this and the blurred lines that can kind of come up. So it's time to take a little bit of a break. This month, Let's Talk About It podcast is sponsored by March of Dimes. We are partnering with them. And this month, March of Dimes is observing Birth Defects Prevention Month, partnering with the CDC. And their goal is to generate awareness among women of childbearing age, families, and healthcare providers about things that they can do to prevent birth defects. And not all birth defects can be prevented, but we do know that there are some actions that women can take before and during pregnancy to increase their chances of having a healthy pregnancy and preventing birth defects. So one of the tips that March of Dimes and the CDC want to give to help you guys be healthy moms and have a strong baby is make sure that you get a healthy weight before pregnant. Make sure your vaccinations are up to date. Don't drink or smoke or use harmful drugs during pregnancy because these chemicals can cause damage to the placenta. and can actually reach the baby's bloodstream. No amount of alcohol has been proven safe for pregnancy, and its use can cause major birth defects. And also taking vitamin supplements containing 400 micrograms of folic acid every day, even before you become pregnant. If this is taken before the first few weeks of pregnancy, folic acid, a B vitamin, is proven to actually help prevent serious birth defects of the brain and of the spine. So again, March of Dimes is partnering with the CDC to do some work in Birth Defects Prevention Month. For more information, you guys can go to marchofdimes.com/let's talk about it. Again, that's marchofdimes.com/let's talk about it. But now back to the show. Before you continue to listen or at the end of the episode, feel free to check out the American Counseling Association's Code of Ethics. It's the 2014 document, and I will list that in the episode notes description as well, so you guys can click on that just to kind of keep those in mind. And again, remember Megan's licensing here, because the different licensing, different people are required to kind of uphold different codes. So the ACA Code of Ethics is my code of ethics, and Megan's is going to be a little bit different here, but I'm excited to get into this to talk to her. So let's get started here. Hi, Megan. Welcome to the show.
Hey, Taylor. Thanks for having me.
Yeah, thanks so much for joining me in this interesting conversation that we're going to have today. I specifically wanted to talk to you and have you on because you are maybe one of the only other therapists that I know of that have parts of their private life public. Being a therapist with a public Instagram, having 16,000 followers on there. And it's not a common thing that we see where therapists have this public life and public image that's very personal, and also this professional part of their life as well. So I'm really looking forward to kind of hearing from you how you manage that and all the nuances around that.
Oh, well, thank you for having me on. I'm excited to have this conversation. I think it's like an overdue one.
Yeah, right? And so I'm curious for you kind of how all this started. So I know like you're a registered clinical counselor in BC. And so when you first kind of entered the world, did you have like a public Instagram? Was that something that like you had talked about, like your dating life publicly and any of that kind of stuff?
No, I mean, gosh. Well, so I finished my master's in 2011. So that was actually before I even had Instagram.
Yeah.
And so I was kind of like in the world of I'd had, internships and everything before that. And then I had like my first major counseling job after that at a college. I guess I got it in 2012. And I think that was about the same year that I got Instagram. And like, I was definitely, I didn't even have my name. Like I wasn't searchable. I made sure that my Facebook, my Instagram, all of that wasn't searchable. Clients couldn't find me. Also because I was like a really young therapist, not unlike yourself, right? So I was like, just turned 25, and like most of my clients I was seeing at this college were older than me. And so I just was like, I wanted to maintain this like real air of professionality. Yeah. And I didn't want people to see the window into my life of like, being a 25-year-old dating. Like that, right? And living my life and partying and traveling and being with girlfriends and wearing like skimpy outfits and stuff like that. And so for quite a while, I didn't really have a public presence. And then what happened was later that year, I started a blog, and I blogged very anonymously at first. I think I had my first name in some of them, but I was like, I really didn't want clients to be able to find me. I didn't want people to make the connection as to like where I worked. I wanted to maintain privacy. I obviously didn't have photos of myself. And that worked for a bit. And, somewhere along the way, and my memory is a little bit foggy, so I have to be really mindful about like the story I'm telling here. But somewhere along the way, I began to feel more comfortable with attaching like my name and face to my writing and some of the stories I shared. And when I've always like written a ton, and, the writing has been my, not only my like creative outlet, but a way that I've coped with my own emotions and stuff like that and my own challenges. And so when I started my blog, it was all very like research supported articles on like insomnia, you know, and like anxiety and depression and stuff like that didn't tell a lot of my own story because I hadn't really been open about my struggles with eating disorders, anxiety, depression, all of that. And so I very slowly became more comfortable like inserting myself into what I was writing and saying, you know, well, this was my personal experience. Here's what I noticed with my clients. Here's what the research says. And so over time, I realized like it was all really trial and error. Nobody taught me like how to blog or anything. Yeah. But I began to notice like how much connection it seemed that people felt to my words when I shared my experience. So there was like a real reinforcement there for me to be open about what I'd gone through and, you know, what I was currently going through and what I observed. And so, I mean, for a while for the longest time, it was just articles. And I've had more than 30 million views on articles at this point. Like I've had a lot of articles out there for many different publications. And Instagram came a lot later. Like I had an Instagram account that, I mean, it's the same one, but I had one where again, I just like shared what other people share on Instagram, which is like little snippets of their lives and whatnot. And, you know, only a couple of years ago, I began to start making a bit more like inspirational. And again, it wasn't with any like strategy in mind. I wasn't trying to like build a brand. I didn't even know what that meant. I wasn't trying to like get clients. I'm like a very opinionated person and I just share. And so I used it as this opportunity to just put some of my thoughts out there and have like engagement and people responded, et cetera, et cetera. And so really, I mean, what is it, 2019 right now? I mean, I'd say only in the last couple of years have I started to like grow more of a following. And part of the reason from that was because yes, like I changed my name on there to my actual name and became more like publicly searchable and made it open and, you know, attached it to my articles and some of the other things I've been doing. But then I also had some like really amazing shout outs from influencers who were like, hey, like this woman's saying really legit shit, like follow her, you know, listen to her kind of thing. So that's kind of like what the evolution of my Instagram following has been. And it's just sort of been self-reinforcing because people seem to, you know, get something out of it. And now I feel pretty confident in knowing that like I do have something to say and I have this like window into a part of the world or a part of the human condition that we don't really talk about that much. And I think it's really important to share that.
Yeah. And it's interesting. Like I didn't know any of that about you and about your story. Okay, so it's that time. We're going to take a little bit of a break because I got a package over the weekend and have been so excited to share it with you guys. It is Native, the all-natural deodorant, and I cannot even begin to describe how amazing the smell was. So I got the coconut and vanilla scent, and I cannot wait to try the other scents. They have lavender and rose and a eucalyptus and mint that also sound like they would be so good. But I love using Native. There's no risk to try it. They actually offer free returns and exchanges in the U.S. And it's very simple ingredients. Less is so much more with Native. You can read all of their ingredients. They list it on there. It's aluminum free. There's no animal testing and free shipping and returns. I honestly am obsessed with it. I got 2 of them and I'm like, I love it as my new favorite deodorant. And for you guys now, you can get 20% off of your first purchase if you visit nativedeodorant.com and use promo code Taylor during checkout. Again, that's 20% off your first purchase. Visit nativedeodorant.com and use promo code Taylor during checkout. But now we can get back to the show. We met at Fireside, the conference that I've spoke about several times on the podcast. And it's interesting because you're coming at it from a little bit of a different experience where it was kind of something that slowly grew over time. And I'm curious for you during that time as you're writing and doing all this stuff, you were at the same time seeing clients. Yeah.
Totally. Yeah.
Yeah. And so I'm curious for you. Like, I think people have this assumption that when you have bits of your private life public and you work as a therapist, that all of your clients are seeing everything that you're posting and that could be really negative. And, you know, aren't you scared to post certain things that your clients might see? And how will that impact people's viewpoints of you being able to get hired by an organization, of, you know, how you deal with that in session with clients? Has any of that kind of came up for you?
Totally. I mean, and I think, look, like those are all really important things to consider when you are putting yourself out there online. While it's, I think, like a beautiful idealistic view to say like, fuck it, I don't care. I'm just going to be me. And like, if somebody doesn't want to hire me, like, that's great. Or like, I don't care. Not all of us have the privilege to do that. And in fact, like, I'm thinking this is like somewhat related, but something that comes to mind for me is I feature, founders with mental health conditions on Forbes. Yeah. And I had someone who I featured and I like wrote an article on them. And, they were doing this really incredible thing and had this initiative that I really wanted to support. And so I featured them. And then, a while later, they decided it just wasn't profitable. And they decided that they needed to get a job. And they emailed me and asked me if I would take the article down because they didn't want to be so open about their struggles, which was both heartbreaking, but also like a reflection of the reality that we live in. And so, yes, like I think it is important to consider, okay, what are the risks here? We can't just blindly go into this and say, oh, whatever, it's fine, it'll be fine. Because it may not be, depending on your circumstances. I think for me, I am in a place where I've resolved I probably won't be ever looking for a job again. Like, I mean, I'm not saying that won't happen. Who knows? But I think just given like my experience and what I know about myself, if it is the case that I am looking for one, I don't think that will hinder me. I think that I will probably be thought out for something because of that, actually, my openness and whatnot. And so, yes. And then to answer your question about clients and whatnot, most of my clients now actually come to me through Instagram, which is like amazing. I never thought that would be the case, like that would be my biggest marketing platform or that I'd have like a marketing platform at all, because none of this has been intentional. Yeah. But so there's a bit of like a self-selection bias or like a vetting process in which I know that the people who are seeking to work with me, a big part of the reason for that is because they value my authenticity and my openness. Now, from like an ethics perspective, I do think it's still really important for us to ask ourselves, whatever it is that we're sharing, are we doing it for us or are we doing it for our clients or for the greater good? And so for me, I'm always, of course, there's an ego element for sure. Like I like getting likes. I like when people are like, oh my God, you've changed my life. Or like, wow, like this is so powerful for me. This is just what I needed to hear today. But that said, like, I still think it's really important to consider how our posts make our clients feel, or just humans feel in general, right? And how it might leave them feeling if they were to read it. And so I will, yes, on my stories, I'll share like, I was just on a girls trip with a bunch of my best friends, and I will share that on my story. But I'm like, you know what? I don't know if it's like the most supportive or kindest thing for me to like preach about what amazing friends I have when so many people out there and so many of my clients are really suffering because they feel socially disconnected, So there's sort of this like, just I'm constantly asking myself, how is this going to make somebody feel when they read this? How is it helping them? Is this for me or is this for them? And when it comes to, certain posts that might be sensitive to clients or sharing information that might reference a client that I would still share in a really anonymous way, I'll ask them. So I'll ask them first and, be like, what is it like for you to, how do you feel about, like, if they a client sent me like a really amazing handmade card that like, was, they had done some piece of artwork or something that was amazing. And it was like a reflection of our work together. And it was something that was a quote that I thought could be super helpful for other people to see. And I asked them, I said, what would it be like if I shared this on my Instagram? How'd you feel about it, anonymously and whatnot? And they were like, oh my gosh, I'd be honored. And it was like really meaningful for them. Now, as I say that, it's also really important for us as therapists to know that there is a power dynamic there. Yes. So, you might ask a client, how do you feel about me sharing this? Or how can I this is why we're not supposed to ask for testimonials. Oh, can I get a testimonial? And then they're like, oh yeah, sure. Sounds good. But that's because they might want to please us, or, they might feel like they know. And so,
and there's that added layer as well, being someone with a high following on Instagram as well. That power dynamic is amplified.
Totally. And so you have to use your clinical judgment with that. Like, you have to be really like self-aware and aware of the relationship and check in and like name those things and really like give them the opportunity to feel empowered to say no in those cases. And sorry, it looks like you're going to say something.
I'm just thinking, like, as you talk about, your thought process in posting things. It's a question I've received a lot. And it's interesting, that you're saying, you're going to take that extra thought to think, okay, well, how would a client feel if they saw this? And when people ask me that, I'm like, no, I don't think of that because this is my personal life. This is my personal page. But it sounds like in a way you've entered somewhat of a dual relationship with clients via Instagram. And so, one of the things as I've been doing all of this and, researching more in the ethics and what specifically, I'm bound as a LMHCA to the ACA Code of Ethics. And one of the things that they reference is that it's highly encouraged that you have a separate professional profile. And that's something that we see the Alexandria Cortez, the congressional woman in New York, that she, has a very high following on her personal page, and that the Democrats wanted her to have a specific page that was professional and that this was going to represent her as a congressional woman. And so that the ACA Code of Ethics has recommended that for people in the helping profession too, to have a separate page. And I think, I'm curious if there's something that you've ever thought about, because for me, when I think about my personal page, it's, well, there's a whole other layer of a question that I want to get to, but I'm curious if that's something that you've thought of at all.
Totally. So, I think I'm just honestly probably too lazy to do that.
Yeah.
And for me, for one, I just have never been one to put effort into marketing. It doesn't feel or to that kind of marketing strategy or doing things for me, I wouldn't be able to make sense of that, because they'd be okay, is this a marketing tactic? I don't know. I'm really lucky. I don't really feel like I need to market myself because I already have I have a long sort of wait list of clients and whatnot. But I think for me, it really comes down to being boundaried and ethical. And so I think part of the reason that there's a suggestion for that is because there's a fear that there will be a blurring of boundaries, and that most people, which is probably a fair assumption, may not be able to be really intentional and aware in their posts and be able to have them in many layers of conversations I have with myself to decide is this helpful or is this not? And don't get me wrong, I'm sure I fuck up, and I know there've been posts that I've done where I've been that may not have been the most helpful thing. But I think so much of what comes out of our governing bodies is really framed in antiquated models of what therapy should look like.
Yes.
And I think it's more it comes from a period of time where social media didn't exist. And it was very much about the therapist being the blank slate or the tabula rasa or whatever.
Yes.
And we were supposed to sit there and not really self-disclose, or if we did, it was very rarely, and not really show that we were humans too.
Yep.
And maintain this air of professionalism and perfection. And maybe that was serving at the time, and maybe that is what some people need.
Yes.
That's not what is authentic for me, and that's not what my clients are looking for, as a result of them kind of selecting me for our work together.
Yeah.
I think that we're currently living in an age where we're surrounded by superficiality. We're surrounded by inauthenticity. We're surrounded by people who are pretending they're perfect,
yes,
who aren't, because nobody is. And to me, that therapist who has it all together and never shares any aspects of their life or the challenges they're dealing with perpetuates the shame in our clients that we're trying to help them absolve.
Yeah. And I think it's important to distinguish between, just being a public person and self-disclosure, because ethically, as a therapist, you are self-disclosing when it's going to be beneficial to the client. And I think that's something that people confuse when you have a public platform and you have a public social media page or whatever, that every single thing that you're doing on there is self-disclosure to your clients. And that's very separate. It's very separate to me.
Okay. So I would maybe disagree on that one, simply because I do think anything we are sharing about ourselves is self-disclosure. Now there's helpful self-disclosure and perhaps not so helpful self-disclosure. There's self-disclosure that comes from, again, ego and wanting to say oh, me, that happened to me too, or look at me, or love me, or, validate me, or something like that. And then there's self-disclosure that's coming from a place of, I see my clients shame or disconnection right now, or, you know, whatever else is coming up for them. And I think that sharing this piece of information based on my clinical judgment will be helpful or could be helpful, because it may mitigate or alleviate some of that, what's getting in the way of our connection, or that wedge that's coming between our relationship. And so what I think about the public page and like, okay, well, this is self-disclosure and this is not, is that unfortunately that's not really how our clients perceive that, or how our followers perceive that isn't really in our control. It's more like, okay, it's out there for them. And because it's public, we don't have control over how they perceive that. And in my opinion, which is totally fair if it's like conflicting, in my opinion, it's still our responsibility to try to make that as clear as possible toward our clients. So I don't know how you would successfully navigate that, like how you could protect clients from seeing something as like clinical self-disclosure and something as just like self-disclosure for our own sake or for our own purposes or something along those lines.
Yeah. Okay, so it's time for a quick little break, and I want to give you guys a fun fact about me. I'm the first person in my family to not get pregnant and have children at the age of 20. So, I mean, I'm sure there are many of you listening as well who are waiting longer to have kids, and that's kind of just the age that we're in, is women are waiting longer to have kids, and now it's actually kind of posing a little bit of a problem, and that 1 in 6 couples are now having trouble conceiving. And I'm really excited, actually. I'm going to do this fertility test with Modern Fertility to see kind of where I'm at. It's a take-home test where you send in your test and you get results back within just a few days. They really do like proactive fertility hormone tests that often are not actually covered by insurance, which usually would cost up to like $1,500. And you can get it at just $159. And one of my favorite parts is that then you actually can get your questions answered after you get your results with one of their fertility nurses. And there's a weekly webinar, which really it's an egginar. And you can get involved within the community with women just like you. So it's really nice that they offer that like extra added support. And I'm really, really looking forward to seeing what my results are, because I'm 25 now, and who knows when I'll start having children. But using Modern Fertility will let me know if I have more or less eggs than average, what I can expect from doing in vitro or egg freezing, and how my hormone levels relate to PCOS, which actually 1 in 10 women have now. And then I'm just going to get some more overall general hormone health, which is like super important and something I'm really curious to learn about. And you guys can now take the fertility quiz and get $20 off of your first kit at modernfertility.com/Taylor. Again, that's $20 off your first kit to take this fertility quiz. Go to modernfertility.com/Taylor. And I cannot wait to share with you guys what my results end up being. But fun fact time over, and now we can get back to the show. For me, at least, and I think, something that the ACA is encouraging of therapists to do now is having that conversation with clients from the get-go about boundaries and about social media usage. So for a client to follow me on Instagram or to follow you on Instagram is completely of their own volition. And they, will have understood the risks and the harm that it could cause to treatment, the harm that it could cause to the therapeutic relationship, and to understand that my social media presence on my personal page, while maybe public, is not a reflection or is not me acting as therapist, and is not me disclosing in a way that is supposed to be for the benefit of your treatment, that is me being me, and that is a very separate part of my life. And so I think it comes down to this kind of blurring of lines of work versus personal life, and of where I think a lot of young counselors struggle with this. And this was a huge part of what I struggled with in grad school, was like, okay, I'm going to be a therapist. Like, what does that look like? Like, who am I becoming as a therapist? And I remember while I was in grad school, I've shared this on the podcast before, but new information for some people, I'm sure. While I was in grad school at Hopkins, getting my master's degree to be a therapist, I was also working as a promo girl for the Hustler Club, which is a strip club in Baltimore. So I was doing that at the same time, getting paid $20 an hour just to go out and socialize. But I'm associated with a strip club. I'm, a young girl in my literally 20 years old. And for me, there was a lot of shame and judgment of working around like, okay, if I'm supposed to be a therapist, like what would a therapist be doing? And it was kind of like, there are things that like, I got to figure out, like I got to figure out my own shit. And like, I'm my own person outside of being a therapist. And what does that look like? And that may be contradicting what people think is what a therapist should look like and all of that. But, I think it's, for me, trying to make it a very clear line of like, okay, I have my business, like my private practices Instagram page is that, and that is for the professional thing. And that is, if you choose to follow that, that's of your choice, but understand the risks. And, it's not me, my personal page is not necessarily me showing my clients everything that I'm doing. If that were happening in the therapeutic session, then absolutely, that's like major boundary crossing of not helpful self-disclosure. But if a client is choosing to make that decision and to seek out that information, then to me that kind of lays on them. And obviously, of course, is something that we can discuss in session. However, I feel like it's really important to allow yourself the judgment-free space in your personal life.
Totally. Well, and I think it's a very much, so I always say, like whatever serves you, right? And like, I think it really is a very individual decision. If you feel like that's not going to get in the way of your clinical work. And also, I mean, if that allows for opportunities for actually deepening the relationship, which many of these difficult conversations can or allow, then that's awesome. I mean, I think for me, I like so much about the way that I practice now after, I guess, more than a decade of practice now is about like, I don't like this term radical authenticity, but like it really is about that. Like when I've said this before on Instagram, but when I applied for grad school or had my interviews in like 2008, I dyed my hair brown. And I like wore glasses. Yeah. And because I did used to wear glasses. I have had laser eye surgery, but I wore glasses. I dyed my hair brown. Yeah. And I like, I tried to portray this like version of myself that was still real, but it was only a part of myself. Yeah. It was this like very cleaned up, very professional, very articulate, poised woman who I thought was what a therapist should be. And meanwhile, I was going out, I was getting fucking wasted. Yep. I was like, I think I was still dating a boyfriend at the time, but like, I partied, I danced, like I was bubbly. I've always been like somebody who talks a lot and talks quickly and swears and listens to rap music. Yeah. And like, I hid that part of myself because I thought this part of myself is not someone who people trust, who people respect, who people want to work with.
I'm going to be judged.
I'm going to be judged. Exactly. This blonde, bubbly girl, like, she can't be wise or compassionate or empathic or, attuned or good enough, basically. Yeah. And when I was in grad school, I got laser eye surgery, and I remember I ended up not having glasses, and I remember sitting in session with clients without my glasses, and I felt so naked. I was like, oh my gosh, like what must they think of me? I don't look smart anymore. And that was so much of my own process that I had to go through. And we go through these processes both in grad school and as clinicians throughout our entire course of our lives as we gain our confidence and give ourselves permission to be imperfect and learn kind of like, what our strengths are and what our weaknesses, and being able to have those really tough conversations with clients that we avoid when we begin our work. And so for me over time, it's not like I'm posting. It's not like every time I go out. I did post a photo on New Year's of me in like a sequiny skirt partying at 4 a.m. But like, it's for the most part, I'm not posting those photos because they're just not relevant to like what I want to share. To me, that's not helpful, right? As I said, almost every post I write is something that will, I think, help my clients or help my followers in some way because it is related to like mental health in some way. And, like why is partying in a sequin skirt related to mental health? Sometimes it's like, okay, here's me being human.
So for you, do you ever struggle with feeling like, because in a way I would wonder how taking that thought of on your personal page of thinking, okay, how am I going to be judged as a therapist through this lens of what I'm going to post, how does that impact you, like mentally, emotionally? I know for me, like, even just me posting a photo in a bathing suit on a beach, for Christ's sake, is, like, oh my God, that's so unprofessional. How could anyone ever want to hire you? Like, you're supposed to be a therapist. And it's like, in my personal life, like obviously it's not something on my business page I would post because it's not relevant. But for me in my personal page, you know, it's like, yeah, no, that's just me. Like,
totally.
Yeah.
Well, and it's tough because like your personal page too, I mean, so much of your following is from being like a reality TV show celebrity, right? Like,
of my personal life happening, you know, my relationship unfolding.
Right. Totally. So your followers are looking for that content.
Mm-hmm. Now my clients might not be looking for that content, which is a totally different story.
You're frozen on me, Taylor. Are you still there?
Yeah. Hold on. It says, are you still connected to Wi-Fi?
Yeah. I'm still connected. It says poor connection.
Okay.
It says the video will resume.
You're back.
I'm back? Okay, cool. Yeah. I can't see you, but hopefully it'll come back. So what was I saying there? So I have posted photos of myself in a bathing suit, but it's usually like, or the last one I posted was with the caption and like a before and after of saying like, hey, you know, I've recovered from eating disorders. Here's me in a bathing suit, something I would never have, you know, shown before, my recovery and whatnot. And, you know, empowering people to embrace recovery because I do work specifically with eating disorders. And so I think for me, like, one of our major differences is simply like my followers are not there necessarily for the content that your followers are probably there for, or a lot of them are there for, which is seeing that aspect of your personal life, which is the bathing suit photos, which is like, you know, the sort of like the juicier details and stuff like that. Now, don't get me wrong. I do think a lot of my followers are interested in my life, particularly because I talk about dating and I want to share that part, but I guess like I feel less constrained simply because you know, maybe it's even just like the small age difference between us. Like I don't know, my generation, no, like my, like those like few years, like
you're like 5 years older than me. In your wise age.
Yes, at this age. I don't like, I just don't feel any, like I don't have a desire to really share a lot of photos of my life just because that don't have like a point to them because to me, I'm like, social media is weird. I don't get it. I still like find it strange. It still makes me uncomfortable. And I only do it because I do think, you know, of course there's ego, but I do think the main reason I do it is because I think I'm helping people and I want to like continue to spread these messages. And so, you know, just coming back to that piece around like authenticity and whatnot, and this idea of like therapists having to be all like buttoned up and like look a certain way. I think that like our clients really are craving connection and imperfection and like a connection to a real human who shares their struggles and, you know, the aspects of their life that are hard or beautiful or beautifully messy or a combination of all of them. And so, yeah, I guess I can't think of times where I have felt constrained. I mean, there might be times where I'm like, oh, it'd be really fun to share this, like, no, even like I could even share my trips to Vegas and like partying with the Stanley Cup. Like,
and what about like your like political views? You know, I mean, I know that's something that, you know, I have to let clients know that, you know, by following me on Instagram, that there are certain things that could harm your treatment and that could harm the therapeutic relationship. And, you know, for an example, like if I share something about, you know, like during the Kavanaugh hearings of like my opinion on that, you know, how do you balance kind of, I guess, kind of that dual relationship that you end up having with clients that follow you? Yeah.
I mean, I guess that's one where, I mean, it's funny. Have you ever seen the video on YouTube that's like, so you want a PhD in clinical psychology?
I don't think so.
I'll send it to you.
Yeah.
Okay. I'll send it to you if you haven't. You can cut this out if it's not relevant. But like, there are definitely areas where I guess I probably play my coach card and I'm like, I'm not going to listen to that, recommendation from my governing body, you know? And one of them is, my political views. I mean, I am very openly feminist. I think that because I am white, able-bodied, privileged, straight, cisgender, you know, educated, born in an English-speaking country, you know, upper middle class, socioeconomic status, I could go on, right? Like, because I'm all those things, it's actually my responsibility from like a social justice perspective, to advocate for marginalized and oppressed populations.
And as a therapist as well, that's like one of our values in this profession is like advocating for social justice. So
Totally. And so for me, I mean, that's just part of feminism is, you know, calling out, you know, what I perceive to be sexist behavior or misogyny, and other forms of that discrimination or marginalization or oppression. And so I think it's not that I wouldn't work with somebody who like supports Trump. Like that's definitely not an issue. I mean, I will tell you, like, there was a time where there was a man I worked with who what he really wanted in our work together was basically to learn how to manipulate women. And I had to working with him for that reason, because I obviously could not ethically support that. Beyond that, I've never again, like at this point, thousands of conversations with clients. I've never had a conversation, even if I have like personally disagreed with it based on my ethics. I've never believed that I haven't been able to kind of like still do good work or strong work. And if I do, and I will definitely acknowledge my biases, like frequently, you know, I mean, my clients, they hear me say this all the time. I have to acknowledge my biases here. Or like, I need to name my biases because, you know, it's hard for me to be objective on this, or, you know, here's like my experience, or there's something that is getting in the way of me being able to, or that will be influencing my response here. Because I do think that's important to our work as well. And, you know, anybody who claims to be unbiased all the time is just not self-aware enough. So I guess when it comes to the political piece, it's more like I actually see it as advocacy.
Yeah, no, I agree with you on that. What kind of like rules do you have? Do you discuss anything specifically with clients? Do you have anything in your disclosure forms that specifically addresses like the social media relationship and presence that you have, where, you know, like of following clients back, of commenting, and of having this relationship on social media with clients?
Yeah. So no, I mean, I don't have anything in writing, and I probably should at this point.
I'm more than happy to share mine with you if you'd like.
Thank you. Yes. I do talk about it with my clients, and I tend not to follow my clients unless they want me to. Like, we'll talk about it, and I just explain like, yes, of course you're welcome to follow me. I'm somebody who, like, honestly, on Instagram, I put stuff out there, but I don't actually really like follow people that much, or like photos, or like I will once in a while, but I'm just more for my own mental health. Like, I don't like to consume social media unless like I follow meme accounts and like feminist accounts. Like, that's basically it. And so for my own, and plus, you know, it can be such an invasion of their privacy. So unless a client like really wants that, or like they follow me and I'll be like, I noticed you followed me, and like, you know, do you want me to follow you back, or like how does that feel, or that thing. Most of the time, my clients nowadays, like, they've already followed me and then they've reached out to me to work with me. So it's not that kind of thing where I'm like, oh, I noticed you followed me on social media. It's like, they're already following me. They're already getting some information. And when I ask them, you know, I'll always ask my clients how they found me and whatnot, or what, like, why they reached out. And usually, like, the most consistent feedback I get is, oh, I like found you through this post on Instagram, or I found you on Instagram, or Melissa Hartwig shouted you out and I checked you out. And like, I just like really related to everything that you said, and I want to work with somebody who gets it and somebody who's been there and that kind of thing. So, go ahead.
And there's a whole other different layer for you, because you also work as a remote therapist. So you also do like phone and Skype kind of sessions. And I just, I want to touch a little bit on that point before we wrap up. But also to your point, I think, you know, ethically, like, you have a conversation with your client about what that social media relationship looks like. And, you know, dual relationships can be very, very tricky. And some therapists are like, absolutely none of that. And in another sense, some therapists are like, you know, you can see where it can be somewhat of benefit to the client. You know, it's something that I've considered in my own personal therapy of, you know, so much of my life happens on social media these days. And, you know, we did throughout my time on The Bachelor and on Paradise, like, my therapist was watching the episodes so that, you know, she was able to process that with me in session. But I've actually never, and I very, very well could have during that time have been like, you know, it would really help if you could like look at my social media to see what I'm dealing with. I would frequently just show her things that are happening. But I wouldn't, you know, I think for some clients that absolutely that could be important to say, I'd really like for you to watch this thing that I was on, or I'd really like for you to follow me to see this happening. But at the same time, therapists need to address the ethics related to that. So like if and to understand the risk that you are now taking into your personal life, where, if a client posts something suicidal and you follow them on Instagram, you're now at duty to deal with that when you're just trying to have dinner and catch up on friends or something like that,
Yeah, the way I see it is it's like we're privy to our clients' lives in the 50 minutes that we're working with them and whatever else they willingly share. So if they send me an email, if they're like, can you read this? Can you look at this? Can I talk on the phone about this? Whatever, text about something, which by the way, like, you have to be really boundaried around as well. But I also think it's really naive and again, antiquated to say like, nope, only like keeping everything to that session because like we're connected all the time. So the way I see it is like we're privy to their life for that period of time. They're privy to our life anytime we put our information out there. And we have, so that's, and again, this is for me, partially also because my account is, it's not, I mean, it is a personal account, but it's like a personal account for the purposes of me sharing what I perceive to be like wisdom and advice and helpful information that I always think my clients and know my client will be engaging in. And then as far as like confidentiality perspective, I will never, like clients will often comment on my posts and I will always make sure when I comment back, there's no potential indication that we're working together professionally.
See, do you feel obligated to respond though, because they are your client then? And then if they see you in a session that they feel hurt,
Yeah. And I think maybe my following, like I do have a significant following and it does, I don't post that often. I probably post once a week. And that's probably, I mean, I post once a week because I would like to engage with all of my comments and whatnot. And so, and I just don't have time if I post more than that. Yeah. So I will respond, not necessarily because I like feel obligated, but because I want to, and I really care about my community. And I really like appreciate that people take the time to comment and share. And it's like such a expression of vulnerability when somebody opens up and is like, oh my gosh, like this meant so much to me. And then for me to ignore them, like I do try. And again, I'm human and sometimes I do ignore them.
Yeah. See, I think I'm just very different in that way where I'm like, no, these boundaries are firm.
Of course. Well, and again, you have so many more I'm like followers and comments and
yeah, but even then to comment back and engage in a relationship with clients outside of therapy, like I just wouldn't, for me, that's like not something I would at all care to do. Like I make it very clear that like, if you follow me, okay, that's, you understand the risks involved. If you comment, you understand that, but like, I'm not engaging in that. I think the general rule that most therapists outside of the social media platform, when you see a client, say at the grocery store, that ethically you don't approach them and you don't, I'm blanking on the word here, but breach. They don't breach their confidentiality. If they approach you, then you can certainly engage, but you still don't breach that confidentiality. So I kind of approach it the same way on social media that, you can certainly approach me on there, but like I'm not necessarily engaging.
Yeah, totally. And I think, again, like what serves you, and as long as you have that transparency in your relationship and they're not going to take that as you ignoring them or like a rupture to the relationship, because that's the thing. I mean, again, like I think it's really like beautiful to assume that they're like going to be like, okay, yeah, whatever, that's fine. I totally get it. But they may feel hurt. And so for me, a client will often comment like, oh, I can't wait until our next session. Or like, I'm so lucky to have you as a therapist or something like that. And in that case, it's like, okay, well, like they've, basically implicitly, given consent to sharing that like we're working together. And so I might comment, either with emoticons or like, yes, like, likewise or something like that, or not likewise that you're my therapist, but, like, something supportive and whatnot. And so yeah, I mean, for me, our work is basically like a reparenting. We are giving people the safety and the love and the support and, the non-judgment and the attunement that they did not have or that they're craving. And so there are opportunities online and through technology that we, in my opinion, are responsible for managing potential ruptures. And so I think like...
Even outside of the therapy session for you?
For me, yes. For me, it's, and again, checking in and like making sure that we're not like over functioning, or we're not working harder than our clients, or we're not like sacrificing ourselves to try to like fix or something like that. I mean, I have clients who reach out with crises all the time and want to meet sooner or something like that. I'm not going to drop everything and not meet them, like, or, and, cancel these other things or other clients to fit them in. I'm going to set a boundary unless obviously it's like they're suicidal or there's a crisis there that is, beyond them being able to wait for a little bit. But no, I mean, I do believe that like we are always therapists to our clients. And that's like, at least from what I learned in through my ethics classes and whatnot was, like you are human, and sometimes you might meet that client out and you might be drunk, and like that happens, like, of course. And then you do process that in the room, and it's not like in that moment you're trying to switch into therapist mode or something like that, obviously, right? But we also have to be transparent that there is a power dynamic that doesn't leave whenever we leave the therapy room. And so we have to just be, in my opinion, again, we have to be mindful of the influence that it will have on our clients and be willing to have the difficult conversations that come up. And, that may arise as a result of them having a window into our personal lives and being able to process like how that makes them feel, and basically like the transference that comes out of it. Cause that's really what so much of this is about, right?
It's like, a lot of transference.
It's so much transference. I mean, I've had clients who I know will feel like they'll be cut through their courage. They'll share like, it reminds me, when I see like you partying with your friends or like, looking beautiful in a photo, it reminds me of like this person who bullied me in high school, and how left out I felt. And I just feel like you wouldn't get it, or you don't get it or something like that, right? And so we have to recognize that like us showing our lives out there,
it can and certainly will impact clients for sure.
Exactly. And then again, realistic expectations for ourselves. We, there's only so much that we can do within our own authenticity and transparency, and then hope that our clients can meet us in the middle and that we can like use that as work in the session or in the room. And it's not always going to be the case.
I want to move a little bit towards some of the work that you do as a remote therapist, because I know a lot of people have had a lot of questions about, what does online therapy look like? And just if you could kind of go through a little bit some of the like ethics related to that. And
so it's such a new field, and I'm sure it's going to change a lot over the years to come. And I mean, I should really clarify that I, for the most part, identify as a coach, and therefore, like, it's a bit of the Wild West, and there aren't really too many ethics when it comes to that. And so with my clients in British Columbia, who I see remotely, I am bound to ethics working with them. And, I mean, it's pretty much everything still remains the same, except for making sure that there is consent to sensitive information being shared through, what do you call it? Non-encrypted, I think is the right term. Non-encrypted
platforms that aren't HIPAA compliant.
Right, exactly. Yeah. So, that's something that I have to like get consent from my clients around, and make sure I will get signatures around like text communication, Skype communication, email communication, that kind of thing. And then as far as like my clients that I see as a coach, which is the majority of them, like I only have a handful of clients in BC, and the rest of them are all over the world. With that, it's really coming down to my own like clinical judgment of what is ethical for them. And so with regards to it being remote, I mean, yes, like the obvious one is what we just shared, information is crossing borders, and, it's open for other people to see, and hackers can get to it and stuff like that. The same thing goes, like no matter, even if I'm seeing a client as like a coach or as a therapist, I'm still, it's still limitations to confidentiality around like harm to self or others, or, child in danger, or, or excuse me, or whatever the being subpoenaed, or, motor vehicle, like all that sort of stuff is still, it still remains. And like I have that conversation with my clients, whether they're my coaching clients or they're my therapy clients. Now, not all coaches do that. Like I don't know if that's part of their ethics, or if they even have ethics really. And so for me, it's really just about like, again, using clinical judgment in any setting. And I don't really like take off my therapist hat and put on a coach hat and change how I work. I'm maybe like a bit more by the book, I guess, with my BC clients, but I wouldn't even say so. Like, honestly, I think I'm pretty by the book for most of them anyway. So there's like the sharing of information, the potential breaching of confidentiality. Just as far as the actual work itself, I mean, there are definitely limitations to Skype or Google Hangouts or FaceTime or Zoom or whatever you want to use, that kind of work versus in the room, right? I mean, I can't see what my clients are doing with their feet. I can't see, you know, I can't put my hand on their shoulder, like, or hand them a Kleenex box when, you know, that feels clinically appropriate, right? And so there are limitations. That said, I mean, I think coming back to the ethics perspective, you know, we work from a medical ethics perspective. I look at, you know, beneficence, non-maleficence, that kind of thing, you know, justice, autonomy, whatever. And so I always think, I'm like, okay, well, is this doing more? Is this, first of all, like, you know, first do no harm, secondly do good? Is this doing more good than harm for a person who's in another country or who can't access therapy otherwise, or who has looked all over, seen many therapists and is like, honestly, you're the first therapist I've ever felt connected to. And to me, it's worth it to have Skype sessions versus, you know, being in the room. Or to the single mom who doesn't get a lot of time and she only has that 15 minutes that she can be away from her child, or while the child is there, or something along those lines. Like, that's where, for me, I'm like, this is more helpful for them to have the limited work that we can do remotely versus no work at all. And not to mention shame. I mean, for a lot of people, even going into an office is it induces shame, especially if they're in a small town where they think they might be recognized, right? Absolutely. So it's actually, like, I think really helpful to offer Skype therapy. I see my therapist is in Vancouver, and I see her. I just saw her last week. I see her in person when I'm there, but I see her by Skype most of the time. And
if I'm traveling, there are times that I'll Skype with mine, but
Totally.
For me, I love the in-person. I haven't done any kind of work associated with the with online therapy at all, like as a professional. But I have done several, like while I'm traveling, you know, that her and I will have a FaceTime or a phone call session. And it's better than nothing when you're traveling.
Totally. And I think we're only like a few years away from like VR therapy or like holographic therapy or like something where we're basically like in the room, but not there, you know? And I think we have to adapt. Like, and that's how I feel about sharing our information about ourselves as well. Like, I think coming back to like the original discussion, like the adaptation we're making is for the times, which is millennials, a lot of millennials at least, who are feeling really like over the superficial social media world we're living in and wanting some honesty.
And who don't feel comfortable sharing and opening up to a therapist who they feel is a blank slate or that they can't relate to, or who they feel is this image of perfection that, you know, is going to judge them. And it's really unfortunate because that's really that's really the opposite intention of what a therapist is, you know? So I think it is important.
I'll never forget a client that I saw at one of the colleges I worked at. And it was when I was really still feeling insecure about being young and blonde and everything like that. And I remember this client said to me, she's like, I'm so glad I got you and not the older guy. And I was like, I know, sort of like, what do you mean? She's like, I could never tell him about my herpes. And I was like, fuck, like I never even like, it was so interesting because like, I had lived for so long believing that I was, one of the flaws that I had was being young, you know, that was like a detriment to my clinical work. And it was like this moment where this client was like, you know, I get, and that's what they said. And I was like, wow, like maybe it's actually a strength to be closer in my client and for them to be able to relate to me.
Well, and it totally depends too. I mean, like, some of my best work I do with like clients in their 40s and in their 30s, which is obviously not my age. And sometimes the work that I do with like younger adults doesn't work very well. And so it really just depends because some people, they love having someone that they relate to and that they feel is, you know, can just have similar experiences that they do. And other people are like, you know, I just want you to be a professional and I just want you to help give me your knowledge. And I don't really care what your background is. I don't care where you're from. I don't care how old you are. But I think especially starting off as a young counselor, that's totally something that you have to fight against, you know, this notion, even when I was on the show, of people being like, you don't have enough experience. Like, how could you ever help someone? And it's like, we've got to stop putting all these like stereotypes and all these limitations on therapists and on what they're supposed to be, because I mean, there's just so much that different people have to offer, you know, that it's really a shame to shame them into thinking that they aren't good enough because they're blonde and, you know, young and beautiful, that how could they be smart and help other people with what they're struggling with? Like, it's just absurd.
Totally.
And the last thing that I do want to ask you here, I think that unfortunately being that we have vaginas and are women, that we experience things a little bit differently sometimes. And especially being therapists and having this public image that we've kind of talked about this episode, how you've considered safety and what that's looked like for you.
Yeah, that's such a great question, Taylor, honestly. And it's like, it's one that I'm still actually grappling with.
Connection.
With, or that I'm dealing with personally, but like, did you lose me?
Yeah, I lost you for a sec.
Okay. Am I back?
Your audio is back now. Yes. Okay. Yeah. Sorry. So if you want to start over.
Okay. Yeah, for sure. That's such a great question, Taylor. And it's actually something that like is kind of still a question mark for me and very relevant for me right now, and something that I'm dealing with, because as I have grown my following, I don't think I considered or thought enough about what that might mean for unwanted attention and my own safety and stuff like that. And it's actually caused me to like kind of take a pause and ask myself, like, I still want to change the world, but I always wanted to have like, international recognition. And I have started to actually question that nowadays. Like, I'm like, do I want that? Like, it seems like it may come with a lot of anxiety.
Yeah.
Because I am so opinionated, and because I do have things that I share that I think, at a certain point with a certain following could put my life in danger, And so I also, like, one of the things I'm working on is being really honest with myself about where I don't recognize signs of danger due to like my own past experience with abuse and whatnot. And so yeah, the try to summarize my answer to your question is I'm very discerning as to who I engage with, particularly in my DMs and who I work with. And that's one of the areas where, again, remote therapy can be helpful, because I'm not going to meet like a strange man. And I shouldn't say like a strange man. I mean, obviously, like, it's not to suggest that like women or all genders can't be aggressive or violent or something like that. But I'm like very tapped into my intuition, and I err on the side of caution. And even like a aggressive or enthusiastic message in my inbox where a person's following up a bunch of times and maybe like wanting to work together,
I'm like very, very eager to work with you.
Yeah. I just, I'm super skeptical. In fact, I'm like, I'm skeptical probably to a fault in some ways. Like, I will oftentimes write off my, accolades or achievements to somebody wanting to fuck me. Like, I will be like, the only reason I got this job, or the only reason that person reached out to me, or the only reason this happened was because they wanted to have sex with me.
Yeah. Well, you're not alone, girl.
Yeah, exactly. And
I know a lot of women feel like that.
Yeah. And I don't think that's like fair to us either, because it's like, no, like I worked for this, I earned this, like, and who knows if like the person was attracted to me or not, and if that influenced their decision, I don't know. And in some cases, I'm sure it was the case. But anyway, I tend to think through that lens of, I don't want to say like paranoia, but just skepticism.
Yeah.
Especially when it's, a man reaching out, wanting to work with me. I will be inquisitive about like what it is that made them reach out to me specifically, if they've had experience with past therapists, what that's been like, why it hasn't worked, as we do with all of our clients anyway, to, really like strengthen the relationship and understand how we can best support them. Yeah. But,
there's
I guess
layers of screening that happen.
Totally. And so when it comes to safety, I mean, as of right now, I do still feel like quite safe. However, I can foresee there being a time where I don't feel that way. And that is actually really causing me to reflect on like how I continue to build my career from here. Like, I always wanted to be a public speaker, and I think I still will be. I want to be like a renowned public speaker. I want to be speaking in front of tens of thousands of people. But I also am aware of how vulnerable that leaves me feeling.
Yeah.
And just how much less boundaried, or how much more challenging it will be to set boundaries when I'm actually in the room with a lot of people, and I can't just either respond to their DM with a like, I'm not interested, or, you know, here's the reason I'm not interested, or, you know, in some cases have to block them, which it certainly happens, as I'm sure you've experienced many times.
I'm a fan of the block button.
Yeah, totally. Which I think is important for us to do and model and whatnot and talk about. But yeah, I think, it's still a question mark for me for what safety looks like within these contexts. And I think, but that's also as women in this world, you know, like it's like, what does safety look like for us and how do we maintain that? And like there are very real threats that we are vulnerable to that we don't necessarily want to like fixate on all the time, because otherwise, you know, we don't get to live our lives, but we also have to be intentional and unfortunately protect ourselves because we have vaginas, like you said.
Yep. It's a very different kind of experience living this kind of life. But yeah, I think like you said, it is kind of a bit of a question mark. And I think as our whole virtual world is changing, that our ethics are changing and our profession is changing, and we all kind of have to change along with that. And change can be very, very difficult. But I think it can be very exciting because you're learning so many different things, and you know, through that kind of struggle is where you grow and where you learn so much, and it's really valuable. So, you know, I'm very appreciative of you putting yourself out there here today to talk with me and to share some of your experiences. And I mean, that's super helpful, you know, for me, and I know for a lot of other therapists to hear this conversation and to just talk about it. So I could obviously keep going on about so many other things with you, and I'm sure we'll chat more and catch up. But yeah, just thank you so much. And if people do have any like questions or want to follow up with your work, like where could they find some of your work, or where should they follow you if you want that?
Yeah, totally. Yeah. Thank you, Taylor. Well, and thank you for your kind words and for starting this conversation, because I think we should be having more of these conversations. And I think like you and I hope one day we'll be seen as trailblazers, you know, and people who resisted, the, you know, or whatever, because we saw an opportunity and because we are critical thinkers enough to not just say like, that's bad, this is good, here's what I'm going to do, be out of fear. Yeah. So thank you for inspiring this conversation, or for having it and opening up. As far as with me, absolutely. Like I really do try to respond to as possible, and DMs and comments and stuff like that. I don't really offer like free consultation. Like I don't talk to people anymore just about my experience for free, because there are enough podcasts out there that I'm recorded on that people can hear my experience and my journey and stuff like that. But, you know, obviously if people want to work with me, or if they want supervision or something along those lines, they can still reach out. And, probably the best way to follow me is Instagram, of course, which is Megan J. Bruno, MEGANJBRUNEAU. They can email me at megan@meganbruno.com. They can go to my site, which is just meganbruno.com. I know Twitter, Facebook. I have a Facebook page that is a professional page. Yeah, I think those are like the best ways to reach out and connect, and I'd love to hear from them.
Awesome. Well, thank you so much again. It was wonderful having you on. And yeah, I'll put all the links for ways to contact you in our episode notes description. So just make sure that you guys check that out after listening. And yeah, thank you so much, Megan.
Awesome. Thank you, Taylor.
Thank you guys so much for tuning in to this episode. I could keep talking about this like all day long. And I definitely will keep talking about this. We will definitely do another episode focused on this. Like I said at the beginning of this, I'm in contact with someone from ACA. Hopefully we'll have someone on to really get into the nitty-gritty here of the ethics of this. And hopefully it's something you guys enjoy listening to and can take a lot away from, because I know it's something I kind of nerd out about. And I know a lot of you guys have questions for me about it, just with my position that I'm in, which is somewhat tricky sometimes, as you can tell from this episode. Sometimes things are not so black or white. There's a lot of gray area in there. So thank you guys for sticking in this longer episode with me, and feel free to leave a review on iTunes, and you can also send me questions at ask.letstalkaboutit@gmail.com. And I hope you guys have a wonderful rest of your week, and I will talk to you next time.
This podcast podcast is brought to you by Wave Podcast Network. Check out all of our shows, including the Brain Candy Podcast, I Don't Get It, Babes and Babies, Coffee Convos, and Let's Talk About It.